Prime Minister Netanyahu's tweet before he landed here in New Delhi. He said, and I quote, "We will sign very many agreements. We are strengthening ties between Israel and this important global power. This serves our security, economic, trade and tourism interests, as well as many other areas. This is a great blessing for the state of Israel," unquote.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, according to sources, it's been said that Israel will be investing as much as $68.6 million to boost cooperation that it has with India in areas such as tourism, technology, agriculture and innovation over a period of the next 4 years. This is what a senior official in Jerusalem has, of course, said as a part of this visit. And also, we have with us on the broadcast Mr. Alan Pincus, the ambassador from Israel and also the former chief of staff to the 4 foreign ministers. Mr. Pincus, if I could just bring you in here. We just saw this very solemn ceremony that took place where Teen Murti Chowk in New Delhi has now been officially renamed as the Teen Murti Haifa Chowk. India's relationship with Israel has now matured. It is not just in terms of defense that the two countries are cooperating. It is not just in terms of tackling with terror. There are other areas. For instance, in tourism, in technology and innovation, Israel has pledged $68.6 million in terms of investment. How do you see this going forward? And of course, the fact that Israel is trying to project itself as a major destination for tourism, targeting many people in India. How do you read this?
In the end, it's going to be businesses to businesses rather than government to government.
Right.
I'm happy that the government is allocating these funds to advance and expand the relationship. And the government, in many respects, leads the way diplomatically, but then it is left to businesses. In technology, computer sciences, medicine, agriculture, and obviously encouraging tourism between the two countries. Again, let's emphasize there is an inherent asymmetry between the two countries in terms of size of population and land. But I think that defense, which includes cybersecurity, cybersecurity are the two main fields in which this relationship will evolve, obviously with a common theme, and that is combating all forms of terrorism, which is now transnational, cross-border, and exists potentially everywhere.
Right.
And so I think the potential there is great. I think that diplomatically, sir, from a foreign policy point of view, we are in 2018. So whatever constraints limited these two countries in developing the relationship in the 60s or 70s or 80s with the Soviet Union and the Bandung Conference of 1955, that is history now. And I think both countries will be looking forward to expanding this relationship bilaterally, but they can also see cooperating in multilateral forms.
Absolutely, indeed. And also there were a couple of hitches, just leading up to this visit of Benjamin Netanyahu. One, of course, was the vote of India on the issue of Jerusalem being recognized as the capital by the United States and the United Nations. This was, of course, something that may not have gone down very well in the state of Israel. And the other one was the $500 million order to purchase the Spike anti-tank guided missiles. And now there is talk that this is something that could be revived. But let's talk a bit about that Jerusalem vote by India. How was this viewed within the state of Israel? Was Israel taken by surprise, considering the close relationship that's actually shared by the two nations and also the rapport between the two premiers of the two states?
Well, without exaggerating the importance of whatever chemistry and rapport exists, India too has its foreign policy priorities and its traditions. And many of Israel's good friends have voted against this resolution. Canada, France, Germany, Britain, Italy, and many other countries with which we have a very significant economic relationship. I think that the declaration by President Trump should be seen as a political declaration that President Trump said, and I don't think for a moment that anyone in Israel expected India to change overnight a multi-decade policy. So I think this was received in Israel with understanding and with all the caution. Of course, it would have been nice had India voted differently, but I don't think that is a serious stumbling block on the route or path toward expanding this relationship. I don't see that at all.
It's not a stumbling block.
And again, this will be tested again in the next few years, so not
absolutely, absolutely indeed. And also the other big, little bit of a hitch which actually took place was that New Delhi had decided to call off the deal to procure 8,000 missiles. These are the Spike anti-tank missiles. And now there's, of course, talk that this deal could actually be, in some ways, revived. India, of course, purchases defense hardware from Israel for almost $1 billion. So there is a big bit of cooperation that India and Israel have in terms of defense. How do you see this relationship going forward? One of the things which Indians, of course, complain is that there is not enough technology transfer which comes in from the state of Israel when defense equipment is purchased. Do you think now India and Israel may also be willing in some ways to transfer technology as well?
Well, I think that they will. I mean, obviously, from an Israeli point of view, there are several constraints relating to our relationship with the U.S. and the annual or decade military grant that we receive from the U.S., which prohibits Israel from transferring technology or components of technology that are made or have been developed in the U.S. I'm not talking specifically about this deal. I do hope it'll be revived again. But I do know that many people in the defense industry in Israel look at India as not the emerging market, but as the single largest market that exists now for Israeli defense technologies. And by technologies, obviously, sir, we don't just mean the platforms, but we also mean the softwares, the technology within the systems. And as India goes forward with modernizing its armed forces, Navy, Air Force, and Army, Israeli technologies, I am sure, will be useful. And again, prohibitions and legal issues with the U.S. apart, I think this too will expand. Of course, I'm not, while I applaud this defense relationship being expanded, I do hope that relationship, the commercial, economic, technological sharing and transferring between the two countries will go into other areas, particularly agriculture and medicine.
Absolutely. We'll be talking a bit more about agriculture. Do continue to stay on, Ambassador Alan Pincus. Meanwhile, these are visuals from just a little while back from the Teen Murti Chowk, which has now been officially renamed as the Teen Murti Haifa Chowk. Immediately after Prime Minister Netanyahu's arrival in Delhi, both the leaders, of course, arrived at the Teen Murti Memorial for a very solemn ceremony to mark the occasion where the Indian soldiers had contributed in what has now become stuff of legend in the retaking of the fortified city of Haifa in the state of Israel in the First World War. The Indian soldiers at that point of time were said to be heavily outnumbered, but it was their stellar bravery, which is still recounted in the state of Israel, through which they were able to retake the city of Haifa from the Ottoman forces. Now, both the leaders, Benjamin Netanyahu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, also later read and signed the Visitors' Book as a part of the ceremony. The ceremony, of course, marks the formal renaming of the Teen Murti Chowk as the Teen Murti Haifa Chowk. The three bronze statues of the Teen Murti represent the Hyderabad, the Jodhpur and the Mysore Lancers, who had in fact participated in the siege of the city of Haifa. They were part of the 15th Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade. The brigade, of course, carried out the assault on Haifa on the 23rd of September in the year 1918 during the First World War. The capture of Haifa had cleared a route for the Allies to the city through the sea. 44 Indian soldiers were martyred during the liberation of the city in the First World War. The 61st Cavalry, even to this day, celebrates the 23rd of September as the Rising Haifa Day. And also Benjamin Netanyahu, just a little immediately after he arrived in India and after he was received and given a very warm hug by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He had taken to Twitter. He had said, and I quote, "We have landed in Delhi. Thank you to my good friend Narendra Modi for the very warm welcome." So this, of course, is the tweet that was put out by Benjamin Netanyahu, and we also expect in a very short while from now that the Israeli Prime Minister will also be holding forth other meetings. He's expected to meet the External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj at roughly about 3 p.m. So another half an hour's time from now, the Israeli Prime Minister will be meeting with India's External Affairs Minister, and then it will be tomorrow that he will be received at the Rashtrapati Bhavan at 10 o'clock in the morning. Remember, this is a relationship that is now going to go, in all likelihood, the way forward is greater cooperation between India and the State of Israel. India had, of course, in the past been a little shy of showing its closeness to the State of Israel because of several reasons, because of the tough relationship which Israel had with its neighbors in the tough Arab-Israeli relationship that it had to put up with. Now, of course, that shyness is gone. India has, of course, come forth, and it has in many ways stamped this alliance, and it has said that the present realities of the world require that the two nations, which are surrounded by some difficult neighbors, will have to come closer, cooperate in areas of defense, in intelligence, in tackling terror. And it's not restrained to just that now. What is also being sought is that tourism is going to be given a big sort of a push between the two nations. And apart from this, agriculture and other technology will also be given a push. Right, and also we still have with us Mr. Alan Pincus, the ambassador from Israel, the former ambassador from Israel. Mr. Pincus, this is a very significant visit. The symbolism of it is what a lot of people will be looking at. Everyone talks about the rapport which Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Netanyahu shared with each other. Their bear hugs are, stuff which a lot of political and diplomatic commentators would look at and say, look, there is protocol that, of course, is being broken. But now India and Israel are going beyond defense and security. Now India and Israel, despite the little hitches that we may have had in recent times, are looking at the broader picture. More people-to-people contact, soft power, in fact, being looked at, where Bollywood is, of course, going to be hosting Prime Minister Netanyahu. How do you see this going forward? I mean, can we expect the tourism between the two nations to actually increase? Will Indian movies, what sort of a market do they have in the State of Israel? Can we expect more of Israeli cinema to also be visible in the Indian context here?
Well, I don't know about the numbers exactly, but I can tell you for a fact that almost everyone I know in Israel has been to India at least once.
Right.
And India remains a very popular tourist attraction for Israelis. There's various kinds of tourism. Young Israelis who want to trek India, and older Israelis or more elderly Israelis who are more interested in the cultural aspects of India. So I could see that expanding. Obviously, naturally, it goes without saying that Israel would more than welcome tourism from India. I think Indians of all backgrounds and fields of life will be very impressed with Israel. I do think, as we said before, that the relationship, more than anything, it has shifted, has changed. There has been a point of departure in the last 20, 25 years, and it's slowly yet steadily being improving. Right. And this visit, as was Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel last July, these visits obviously contribute and facilitate greatly. By the way, you mentioned symbolism. Prime Minister Modi published a tweet in Hebrew a short while ago, in which he is welcoming very warmly the Prime Minister of Israel to New Delhi and to the visit, to the entire 6-day visit in India. So I'm sure that the Hebrew touch to it adds to the positive symbolism.
Absolutely, indeed. And of course, the other, image that actually had stayed with a lot of people in India while Prime Minister Narendra Modi had visited the state of Israel in the month of July is what was done by the two premiers, where they had rode a certain jeep which was used for the GAL mobile water desalinization and purification jeep. And this, of course, is going to be presented as a gift by the Israeli Prime Minister to the Indian Prime Minister. So this greater cooperation in terms of desalination and agriculture that we expect to see between the two nations, how significant is this, and how do you think this is likely to change agriculture in either nations?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on agriculture, but we all know that the scarcity of water is an issue that concerns both countries.
Absolutely.
Israel is shifting away from agriculture in the last from mass agriculture, the way it was popular and a significant portion of the economy in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Yet agricultural technologies are being developed very rapidly.
Right.
And I think that in terms of desalinization, irrigation systems, automated and computerized automation. Look, just the other day, it was published in Israel that a farmer of vast experience, an 83-year-old farmer, developed an application that would tell the farmer when the trees require water. I mean,
right.
You don't need to sit in a room with 17 computer screens. It'll be an application on your smartphone.
Right.
So I think that, and this is just an example about which I know very little. I am sure that the need in India, the growth of the population, the scarcity of fresh water, and the need to manufacture high quality produce that does not rot easily or quickly, yet remains high in quality, is something where Israel can help India. Again, let me emphasize, I'm not an expert on agriculture, but it is most definitely second to defense in terms of in what field can we expand this relationship.
Absolutely, indeed, Mr. Alan Pincus. Thank you very much indeed for having joined us on this broadcast. A former diplomat from Israel. They're talking to us about the manner in which the India-Israel ties will progress from here. It's not just cooperation in the field of defense, it's not just in the field of terrorism, but also several other aspects which will bring the two nations of India and the state of Israel much closer to each other. It's not just defense, it'll also be agriculture, it'll also be tourism, it'll also be technology, it'll also be greater cooperation in cyberspace, which will now bind the relationship between India and the state of Israel. These visuals from just a little while back, where the Israeli Prime Minister and his wife Sarah signing the Visitors Book. We also saw the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi there welcoming his friend Benjamin Netanyahu with a bear hug. This, of course, is a relationship of the 21st century that's going to get better and better. And it now remains to be seen. It's not a short visit. It is a 6-day long visit. And one of the highlights, of course, will also be the reception which Benjamin Netanyahu will be getting in the city of Mumbai on the 18th of January, where he'll be hosted by at a specially choreographed event by name Shalom Bollywood. And the event will be held on the 18th of January, and this will of course be one of the showpiece events during Netanyahu's 6-day visit to India starting today. Netanyahu and his wife Sarah had, remember, hosted Prime Minister Narendra Modi at their residence for a 3-hour-long dinner in Tel Aviv last July. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu will also be travelling to the city of Agra. He'll be there to see the Taj Mahal, one of the iconic monuments in India. And this of course, is a visit that is loaded with symbolism, the rapport which the two heads of the states actually are enjoying, the two premiers, is something which points towards greater cooperation between India and Israel. And also in an exclusive interview to WION's senior correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran, Israeli ambassador to India Daniel Carman has said that India and Israel share a rich and a strong relationship. Let's listen in to what the Israeli diplomat had to say.
May I begin by asking you, in terms of optics, have the cancellation of the Spike anti-tank missile or India's vote for the UNGA resolution come as a disappointment to Israel? Were you surprised at all by the decisions? And also, has Israel put those developments behind it ahead of the visit?
I would not want to comment specifically on those areas that you mentioned, because the relationship, and this will be reflected during the Prime Minister's visit, as all our relationship are reflected in the last few years, by the fact that the relationship are larger than specific events. I don't want to mention specifically the cancellation of the Spike, because I would just tell you that there are processes that have take their time. What will be reflected during this visit is the fact that those relations are rich. They are all-weather relation. It's an all-weather relationship. Sometimes we have and we can speak, and we do speak all the time. We have a wonderful relationship on the governmental level. But I would like to add an ingredient that needs strengthening, and it will be strengthened, which is the involvement of the business community in these relations and the people-to-people connect.
So this, of course, is what is being spoken about, the recent hitches that India and Israel may have had in their relationship in recent past in terms of the Jerusalem vote, and also India having cancelled the Spike anti-tank missile order of $500 million. This is being said will not be a stumbling block between the two nations. The visuals that you see on your screens are from a little while back, where the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is, of course, meeting with the other dignitaries who were present at the Teen Murti Chowk as they welcomed him for a very solemn occasion, with which the Teen Murti Chowk in New Delhi has now been renamed as the Teen Murti Haifa Chowk to commemorate the historic and the heroic battle in which 41 Indian soldiers had laid down their lives. This, of course, points to the history of the India-Israel relationship that the two countries, of course, enjoy. And remember, India is the largest buyer of the Israeli military equipment, buying anywhere about $1 billion of Israeli military hardware annually. And now what is, of course, being spoken about is Israel, not just with the military hardware, but also should transfer technology to India as India buys more of its defense equipment. But this is a relationship that is not going to be curtailed and will not remain restricted to defense purchases and defense trade between the two nations. It is now going to be something which will become much broader, spanning over to other areas such as tourism, people-to-people cultural exchanges, to agriculture, to irrigation technology, in terms of several other aspects, so that the relationship of India and Israel now becomes a relationship that is very well established. In the past, India may have been a little shy of coming out openly of its relationship with the State of Israel, but the fact of the matter is India and Israel, considering the kind of hostile environments that they actually exist, will have to come closer, and that is exactly what this visit is all about. In terms of symbolism, it's almost perfect. In the month of July, what you see on the right of your screens is Prime Minister Narendra Modi being welcomed with a very warm hug by the Israeli Premier. And on the left of your screens, the same gesture has been reciprocated by the Indian Prime Minister to his Israeli friend Benjamin Netanyahu, as he and his wife Sarah have landed in New Delhi. At 3 p.m. we expect the Israeli Prime Minister to, of course, meet with the Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. The meeting is expected to last about half an hour. And tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, we expect the Israeli Prime Minister to be at the Rashtrapati Bhavan for a reception. And at about 10:30, he will also be at Rajghat for a wreath-laying ceremony. And this is a visit which will, in many ways, redefine the India-Israel relations in the 21st century.